The NFL has done it again. Another interesting, weird broadcast of a game, but this time it was The Simpsons. There have been some other animated versions of games as alternate broadcasts in the past, but for the first time ever, the NFL took its talents to Springfield, where Homer and Bart suited up and subbed in randomly for the game. And it was every bit as wild as you probably could have imagined. It starts off with Homer and Bart playing football outside, and it's essentially played like it's a dream that Homer is having. He went back inside to watch the Bengals and Cowboys game on Monday Night Football, and instead he fell asleep, so it was a dream so that the game could actually be held in Springfield instead of Dallas. But don't worry, even the Simpsons universe has their own version of the Manning cast with Simpsons versions of Eli and Peyton Manning. There, funny enough, is also a Stephen A. Smith in the Simpsons broadcast too, because why would there not be? So we ended up having Bart play for the Bengals while Homer played for the Cowboys. Lisa also played for the Bengals, and I gotta say, that girl is fast as fuck, boy, and even gave a good pregame speech, as did Mo Sizlak for the Cowboys, who was also a beast playing linebacker. We also got characters like Barney, Nelson, Herschel, and Ralph all playing some snaps too. We got cool pregame intros from the characters too, just like it was some normal primetime game. Marge was also there, and some characters would ask questions to the players, who would then answer the questions on broadcast in some pre-recorded stuff, which was pretty cool to see. So the game started off with a coin toss that was actually just Marge flipping a coin for Bart and Homer. We didn't have to wait too long to get some really fun plays from the Simpsons characters. Homer subbed in for Cooper Rush pretty early on, and on 4th down, he hit CeeDee Lamb wide open for the touchdown. We got to see that crazy touchdown animation that pops up with all the donuts and such, and the extra point actually goes through the uprights, which is actually just a bunch of donuts stacked up on top of each other. The Bengals then did sub in Bart for Joe Burrow, and Lisa also came in. Bart later ended up throwing a touchdown to Ralph, which was actually just Jamar Chase for the Bengals to tie the game up. Mo Sizlak made a huge play later on to stop Chase Brown on a 4th and 3 to get the turnover on downs, and then instead of Brandon Aubrey coming out to kick the field goal, Lenny and Carl came out and drilled it for the Cowboys to regain the lead. The word good was spelled out in donuts after the field goal was hit, and we even got a cameo from Krusty the Clown, as we did for a lot of the night. So not only did we get some of these really cool moments where the Simpsons players would sub in, but there were also some pretty cool animations that would just show up with them. Like, we had Lisa running with the ball with some smoke or fire coming from behind her, just showing how fast she was running. Itchy and Scratchy were the chain gang for the game, which was really cool to see. And then there was even this UFO thing that appeared to be the marker where the ball was going to be placed. Then whenever a team got a first down, there was this cool animation of a bunch of donuts that would pop up on screen. Marge was hanging out in the crowd, and so was Grandpa, with a sign that said "Old Man Yells at Crowd" instead of Cloud, which is just hilarious. But don't worry, we didn't miss out on little Maggie Simpson. She was up there working the Skycam the whole night long. There were a bunch of other characters that randomly just popped in, but probably the funniest was Mr. Burns sitting next to Jerry Jones, allegedly discussing family, the game, and world domination. That was probably the funniest part of the whole broadcast, honestly. We did get another big Dallas touchdown early in the 3rd quarter as Homer Simpson found Brandon Cooks to tie the game. Funny enough, in celebration, Homer then jumped into the crowd. Later in the quarter though, Bart was picked off by Homer to get the ball back for the Cowboys, and oddly enough, it looked like he actually caught the ball with his head. Tracking for these games surely is not a perfect science quite yet. There was another interception earlier in the game when Geno Stone had the pick, but the tracking actually looked like it was Cam Taylor-Britt, even though the ball just hit him in the chest plate and bounced off, allowing Geno Stone to get the pick. The tracking for these games is definitely still off a little bit, but it is getting better, especially compared to some of the earlier trials of these animated games they've done. I gotta say, it was pretty funny watching an important game coming down to the wire late, and it was on the Simpsons broadcast. They literally subbed out the football at one point with Spider Pig. Yes,
Spider Pig. Spider-Pig.
And then Krusty the Clown came in to tie the game with 10 minutes left. It really was just a hilarious way to watch a football game. Then later in the game, Milhouse caught a pass from Bart Simpson, and he actually ended up fumbling the football, which was a big deal because there were some very serious things at stake for the Simpsons game. If the Bengals won, Bart got Homer's desserts for a whole month. But if the Cowboys won, then Bart had to dress up like Homer and go to work dressed like him. Now, the actual biggest play that resulted in the Bengals winning, ultimately 27-20, was pretty insane and didn't make a ton of sense whether you were watching the regular broadcast or the Simpsons one. But on the Simpsons broadcast, it made it even more wild. The Bengals had a punt late with about 2 minutes left, and it ended up getting blocked by the Cowboys. But once the ball was actually touched by Dallas, the Bengals then recovered it and got the football back. Cincinnati then ended up going down and scoring as Bart hit Lisa for another touchdown with fire coming from her feet because she was running so fast. Now, the Cowboys surely did have a chance late, but they needed to drive all the way down the field and just couldn't. On the Simpsons broadcast, at the end of the game, the whole Bengals team was subbed out for just Bart, and then the whole Cowboys team was subbed out for all Homers. The Homers ended up getting stopped, and the Cowboys ultimately lost 27-20 as the Bengals won the first ever and maybe only ever Simpsons broadcast. It was another pretty cool production that ESPN put together to try to help grow the game and find new creative ways to spin the way to watch the NFL. I do wonder though why the whole reason they did the Simpsons. The first big one that they did was a Toy Story broadcast, which clearly had some of its own issues, and we did a whole video on that one if you want to go back and check it out, but it was certainly an odd broadcast. There's also been plenty of tries from Nickelodeon to do something like it, where we've seen SpongeBob and Patrick and other iconic Nickelodeon characters, and the MVP when somebody wins and gets slimed, and also the graphic slime that pops up in the end zone whenever somebody scores. However, in comparison to those broadcasts, I don't really see The Simpsons as a kid type of show. It's certainly a tamer adult animation show, but I still don't see it as a kid show. I honestly figured that the other broadcasts were to try to grow the game, specifically to kids, and that obviously wasn't the case with The Simpsons necessarily. But at the end of the day, it was still really cool. There is still a really long way to go to make these types of broadcasts great and honestly actually practical. The tracking isn't always great, and while an actual play is going on, it can be a little boring and sometimes actually hard to tell what's going on. But ESPN just does a great job with the cut-ins and the little things that they've prepped beforehand to connect The Simpsons to the NFL. So it does end up being a pretty cool product, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't really feel the need to watch the real broadcast to actually know what was going on. But as for the Simpsons broadcast, I think a lot of credit has to go to Drew Carter, who also works for NBC Sports Boston. I love him. He just did a fantastic job again calling one of these games. I can't even begin to imagine the kind of prep that a play-by-play guy has to do for these games in order to know everything about a show series in addition to what is actually happening on the field. But once again, he absolutely killed it. And the addition of Mina Kimes and Darren Orlovsky was absolutely great as analysts. Those two are just absolutely fantastic and a blast to listen to, and they very clearly know what they're talking about when it comes to the game of football, so just great additions there by the ESPN team. Overall, it was a pretty cool experience to watch once again, and luckily, it actually ended up being a pretty good game. It's two teams that are 5-8, so maybe not the biggest heavyweight battle, but it ended up being close, and pretty important if either the Cowboys or Bengals wanted to somehow get really hot and try to make a postseason run, no matter how unlikely that might seem at this point. Above all else, Jamar Chase really stood out in this game with 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. Joe Burrow threw for 369 yards and 3 touchdowns with an interception, and they've just been playing so well on offense, and finally they got a little bit of help on defense to help secure the win, which certainly does help when you're playing Cooper Rush, who ended up with 183 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. CeeDee Lamb was his top guy with 93 yards and a touchdown, and Rico Dowdle absolutely crushed the rushing game with 131 yards. It ended up being a good game, and an even cooler game if you got to watch it in Springfield with The Simpsons.